Dan Schinder here on Drum Talk TV. I cannot believe we are just about to start the last month of 2023 and have a wonderful topic today with our guest Levon Strand, who is talking about a gear nut. Lee's a gear master. He'll tell you more about what he does in a moment, but the short version is he deals with a lot of gear under a lot of different conditions. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is the difference between backline and venue gear. They're not the same thing. We're going to talk about transporting gear. We're going to talk about what do you do about gear for fly out gigs? What do you do about gear for bus tour gigs? What do you do about choosing your gear, taking care of your gear? Because Lee, I see a lot of people post things like, "What's the best head for this? There is no best. It's your effing favorite. There is no. It's like saying, what's the best pizza? Everyone has a different answer. So let's remember that all these things are, subjective. But how are you today, man?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to talk about this stuff because I think I I think drummers might be more into their gear in some ways than any other musician. Not that other musicians aren't into their gear, but we even the smallest drum kit typically has the largest piece of real estate on the stage unless someone's got a grand piano. But a small drum set, even a small jazz kit with a ride and a crash and a hi hat and four drums, is really kind of like a mini orchestra, if you will. And there's so many parts and sounds to each piece of that, each cymbal, the hi hat itself is its own orchestra, and each drum that I'm really excited to talk about all those differences I mentioned in the intro. So let's start with this. Tell people that because some people don't know. Like me personally, I've been playing 54 years. I didn't even hear the word backline or venue gear until about 12 years ago, right before I started Drum Talk
Yeah.
TV. And I'm like, backline, like venue gear. And when I see memes that show the first gig and it's a giant obnoxious setup like my big blue kit, and the third or the last gig and it's a four, never ever, excuse my language folks, but I have to let it rip, would I ever fucking think of doing a gig in that band without the instruments I used to create the sounds on that recording. So I couldn't even get my head around why would you use someone else's gear and what does that all mean. So I'll hand the floor to you and kind of give us a rundown. What's the difference between those two concepts?
Okay, so a lot of it has to do with time. If you don't have time to get your gear to the venue, you might be stuck using venue gear. Or if you have the choice between using house gear or bringing your own, of course you're going to bring your own. But if you're, like you mentioned, a fly day, if you're flying, you can't get your gear there, certainly not economically. You can't get it there on time to get set up. So you'll call a backline company, or more likely the promoter will call the backline company and hire us to bring gear to your specifications. And that's a big difference between house gear and backline companies is we supply gear to spec. And what you get when you're, and those photos that you're talking about and the nightmares that you hear about are almost always from people having to use house gear. Just that's what's there.
Yeah.
Use it, and you're stuck with it. So
Yeah.
you make the best out of a bad situation.
And
But
in
we
my
do everything to
day,
spec.
and I got to say it like an old man, because back in my day, there was no house gear. There was no such thing. I mean, not at least in LA and Hollywood when I was playing all through those areas. And even when I think about my first two bus tours, I took my stuff with me. So later in life, like I said, about 12 years ago, I had been playing 42 years by then. I was just not familiar with the concept because I hadn't been gigging in years. I was recording, I was
Yeah.
producing, I was out of music for a while, completely for a while with a video production company. And I just, well, like my wife says, just played with himself on the drums. So I wasn't familiar with the concept. So I'm kind of learning along with some other people newer to these concepts as well.
Well, we do this for like corporate events or festivals, and then it's not so much to spec. It's just you got to bring out a really good quality 5 or 6 piece kit along with the amps and the stuff. And like you mentioned, the real estate issue on the stage, the whole name Backline comes from, I mean, it stems from where on the stage geographically the gear was placed. You had a front line, which was mostly people. It was singers and dancers. And then in the back line was drums, guitar amps, keyboards. And this is all the stuff that it's really difficult to travel with, you know, difficult to
Yeah.
fly, especially.
Right, absolutely. And who pays for this? Is it the promoter? Is it the musician? Is it the band as a company? Who typically pays for you bringing Backline to a gig?
A lot of it depends on the scale of the show. The promoter usually pays for all of the ancillary expenses, and those are outlined in the rider of the contract. So it's going to say somewhere in the contract, it's going to say buyer to pay for, or buyer to provide this equipment at his expense or at no cost to the band or whatever. So you're going to end up, the buyer's going to pay for it, usually the promoter or the club owner or whatever. And a lot of times they'll have a house kit sitting in the corner there, but the drummer or the band will be fussy enough where they'll say, yeah, we need it to be to spec, especially if it's an endorsing artist.
Right.
They're going to be playing something that they have to play because they have a deal with the company, you know?
Yeah, they can't have brand A on the bass drum head or the badges when they play brand Z. It doesn't make sense.
Right. It's frowned upon. I mean, it happens all the time, and you can see the people gaff tape over the logo head on the kick drum a lot of the time. And, you know,
Yeah.
it happens, but especially in a festival situation, but you're not supposed to. You're really supposed to play your brand. And there's a whole set of rules with, you know, like backline companies and how we handle that. With we have arrangements with, like, I have DW and LP and quite a number of Aquarian drum heads. We've got deals with all these companies.
Right. That's cool. Thanks for explaining that. I have a question that, and folks, you can ask questions in the comments while we're live, and I'll scoot through and relay those to Lee, and I'll send him the link to where this is posted on all our channels afterwards, so that if you have questions, Lee, maybe from time to time, you can take a look and chat in. But this is an interesting question that I never ran into, like I said, back in my day, and I've never heard anyone bring this up, so I don't know how common or uncommon this is, but Thomas Souza, thank you, Thomas, for chiming in one of the promos about the show today. He says, and he might be watching. I'll take a look at the comments in a moment. But he says, question. Recently, I had a show that I had to go backline. This joker added to, I hope it wasn't you. This, this joker added $250 to my bill, charging me for heads. He said it's industry standard. I was pissed, so I told him, if you're going to charge me, then I'm keeping the heads. And he said, no, I've never been charged for heads ever. That's the fourth time I've gone through them, and they didn't do it the other times. Is it really industry standard, or was this guy just an a hole?
I don't want to call anybody an a-hole.
Right. Yeah. And I abbreviated that.
I've never charged that much to change heads on a kit. And one of the things you should know is we don't often, we'll change the heads to, especially the kick drum heads we have in stock. We don't go out and buy a brand new head every time someone asks for a super kick or a power stroke or whatever they're asking for. But we do have them in stock. So we'll put what they want on the kick, but on the rest of the drums, if they ask for brand new heads, we'll go buy them. And it usually costs around $100. That's kind of the old price. It's now closer to 150, but I've never seen it $250. That's way high.
And is that mostly for the labor of doing it rather than paying for the heads? And that's probably why they said, no, you can't keep the heads?
Great question. It's not the labor at all, because that's practically free. We just look at the drums as we're putting them in cases for the guy.
Yeah.
And if it has if it needs a new head, we'll put a new head on it. If he specifically wants brand new heads, we'll buy them. We'll go down to Tommy's drum shop down the street and buy new drum heads and put them on for him. But we don't charge for the labor on that at all.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. So I have a drumhead story for you that can kind of ties in with this, and we can kind of go on from there as well. you asked me about that head, that Aquarian head, and
Yeah.
that was to my recollection, possibly the first Aquarian head I ever had. And I know the guys; they're great guys. I knew Roy, and what happened was I had. Um, okay, this ties into the question you could save the answer to for later, because I know guys that change snare heads after every gig. I play pretty often. I've been playing for 54 years. I can play pretty hard, but I also can play with a lot of finesse. Just depends on the music I'm playing. And I had a set of heads on my Big Blue kit for 18 years. And the only head I changed along the way there, sorry, my cat is invading, was the snare drum head. I'm going to have to move her. And the heads did sound fine. They still sounded great. And what happened was I saw a different type of head at a gig that we covered in Singapore, a big festival. And I said, oh, and they were new. I said, oh, I've always wanted to use those. So when I got home, I called that brand, asked them about it. They sent me those heads. And I had those on since November of 4 years ago. And you and I were talking earlier before we went live about the Drum Talk TV 10-year anniversary show that you were at. And we used all Aquarian heads for the Green Sparkle Bonzo kit I played and for A.D. Adams' other double bass drum kit because those were his drums. He's an Aquarian artist, and I offered to get him all new heads for both kits for the gig. And when I was talking to the guys over at Aquarian, they said, do you want Aquarian heads for your drums as well? And I said, if that's okay. So I got all new heads for both my Big Blue kit and my small 4-piece jazz kit. And I love them. They're great. And I personally like heads and sounds where they ring out. There's tone. I think drums should be
Yeah.
musical. Drives me, and I know everybody's preference is different, and that's okay. But it drives me nuts when I see a guy or a girl playing a 6-piece kit and all the toms sound the same because of the heads, and then they've got gel or dots or spots or dings or dongs or whatever on the head,
Yeah.
and it like I can't imagine as a drumhead manufacturer or a drum company going through all the R&D and everything they do to make great products, and then people stick stuff on it to make them go thud, and they all sound the same.
Yeah.
That's just me. That's just me. I'm not saying don't do that, folks. Do what's right for you and the music you play and the response you want from your sticks. But that kind of leads to the conversation of how often do you change heads on backline kits? And I'm sure it depends on in what condition they come back, but is there kind of a general rule? And what's your answer to people who say, what is the best heads for XYZ?
When we're doing a festival, we'll put on pretty heavy heads like 2-ply response twos or emperors. I usually on toms, I usually go with clears. On my own kit, everything's coated because I'm old and I'm just old school. But
Me too.
all that clear stuff seems to look better, so it kind of holds up better, unless somebody really digs into it and puts dimples in it, and then they got to go.
Yeah.
That's it. They're done. And I have a kit that we just sent out. It's actually 30 feet away from me right now. We just sent it out, and we put a brand new 18-inch floor tom head on it, and it's the one that we replaced because everything else was used one time by a light hitter, so nothing needed to be replaced. But we put a new 18, and that's the head that got destroyed. I don't know how this guy was digging into it. Maybe it was out in front, because that's one of the things about, we call it backline, but it's no longer just on the back line.
Right.
Backline gear now encompasses so much other stuff. We can talk about that in a moment. But yeah, I change the heads when they visually look beat to hell, and if they don't sound right.
Yeah, like buzz and stuff from dimples.
Yeah,
things
if they sound a little weird, it's like, okay, that needs a new head. And we have stacks of really good quality used heads. And my old partner at the studio used to go to Uganda, and he would take boxes of our used heads because that's better than anything they could get there. So we used to donate them for these musical groups in Uganda.
Oh, that's great. Funny thing, when I was in junior high school and I was in concert band, I was first chair drummer all 3 years, and the snare drum that everyone fought over to play. I don't mean really fight, but that everyone vied for. I'm playing the red one. It had the most beat up head. It didn't have dimples, but it was a coated head, a Remo coated head, worn down to where it was
Sure.
clear, and then the dark gray, and then the white. And it was the best sounding head out of all the snare drums.
Wow.
Yeah, but no one saw
Well,
it, so there was no like aesthetic factor, you know.
yeah, you mentioned Roy Burns a little while ago, and he was a close personal friend of mine for 30 some years.
Yeah.
He and I worked together side by side at a music store in West Covina back in the old days. I mean, in the early 80s. And he used to do all the clinics. He would book all the clinics and do all the educational stuff.
Right.
And he would write the concepts article standing right next to me with literally a yellow pad and a pencil and erase things and rewrite it. I mean, he was a sweetheart of a guy and I loved him to pieces. It's unfortunately passed away recently. But I've
Yeah.
been using Aquarian heads since they literally first came out. The first batch, I think I
Wow.
got some from Roy. And yeah, I still use them. And in fact, I was at the Aquarian uh, facility in Anaheim not long after the 10-year anniversary party, which was a blast. Thanks
Oh,
for inviting me.
sure. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it was awesome,
We
man.
want to give a
And you
shout
know,
out to
you saw
Raquel. Have to give a shout out to
Raquel, yeah,
Raquel. Yeah.
yeah, Raquel and Marie, they
Yeah.
were there.
Absolutely. And
And yeah, so Raquel is a great friend of mine, as you know.
yeah.
But yeah, so well, where was I going with this? We
With
were talking
Roy.
about the Roy. He started with cymbal springs, you know, and a
Yeah,
couple of
yeah, yeah.
the
So
synthetic
for those who
drumsticks.
don't know, yeah, I want to chime in because Roy was a sweetheart of a guy. He would just call me out of the blue sometimes and just start talking about drumming. It was amazing.
Yep.
But Roy invented the tilt screw for under the hi hat, under the bottom hi hat, and he
Yep.
also is the one who invented the concept of the drum clinic. He's the one that
Yep.
actually came up with that, which is amazing if you really think of all that. And I remember he gave me, I have it in my rack somewhere. His big band CD was just amazing, and my wife especially. I am too, but my wife especially is way invested into jazz and swing and big
Oh,
band
sure.
and yeah, just a great guy, a true innovator of the products that drummers use, and some things that we take for granted, like the spring, like you said, and the tilt screw, and I think to some degree even the drum head. Like it's like socks. They're all around us. As drummers, we all have them, but well, who invented the tapered heel or the covered toe or the breathable knit or it's like someone's responsible for that, and Roy was a true innovator, and to start a drumhead company amidst other giant, companies at the time, that says a lot about him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he was a great guy. And at NAM, every year I go to NAM and he would be my very first stop. And he would always tell you a dirty joke right off the bat. And he would
Yeah.
always, frequently, I'd get there and he would just go, at 10 a.m., he'd say, let's go get a drink. And I'd be like, the show just opened. And he goes, yeah, it'll be here for 4 more days. I need a drink. No, I loved him to pieces. He was a wonderful guy. And, you just
Yeah,
don't meet people like that all the time.
absolutely. And Drew Whirl gives you a shout out, says, "What's up, Lee?"
Love you, Drew.
And let us know if you have questions, folks. How, being that you work with so much gear for so many different types of gigs, genres of music, and players, what's your best advice for people who do ask, what's the best ride cymbal? What's the best this? What's the best that? Or how do I choose a blank? Being that you work with so much gear, I'm thinking you've got some years of wisdom built up in that area. I tell
Well,
people use your ears. Don't ask anybody.
that's
That's what I tell
exactly
people.
it. Yeah, use your ears. But one of the things I tell people is this: no matter what brand you play, no matter what cymbals you play, especially, by the time it gets to the audience through a sound system, They're all going to sound exactly the same. The sound guy is going to make them sound like nice sounding crash cymbals, no matter what they sound like on stage next to you.
Right.
They're going to sound the same out in the audience. So that's my advice: is buy something that sounds good to you, and they'll fix it in the mix.
Yeah, in your price range and something that you're proud of that helps you. I've learned over the years that for any instrument, when we like our gear, we
Yeah.
magically play better.
Yeah, and I think there's something to that. If you play backline kits all the time or house kits all the time, you learn how to play. It's baptism by fire, man. You learn how to play uh, and be a better player by the
Being
adversity of it.
adaptable, right? Being
Yeah,
adaptable.
you're more adaptable. And like years ago, a friend of mine, we used to go on like Thanksgiving weekend. We would set up 5 or 6 drum kits complete, all with cymbals. Everything was all set up, and we would go from kit to kit. And one of the things I learned was you play a little differently based on how the drum kit is responding to you. So if you
Absolutely.
play a jazzy kit, you're going to play a little jazzier than you would on like your blue kit.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Um, Michelle Trevino says, "Hi Lee, Roy was sweet. Shout out to Raquel too. Oh, that's cool. Hi Michelle, thanks for chiming in." One of the things that we wanted to talk about was you giving some advice to how to create the best rider and what that means for those who don't know as well.
A rider is your specifications of what you want or need to play. And especially if you're an endorsing artist, you need to mention this specific brand should be on stage if at all possible.
Right.
And a rider is how you go about getting what you want at every show. And you won't get what you want exactly at every show, but it'll get much closer, especially if you're, big backline companies put a lot of time and money and energy into keeping up their gear. It doesn't help us if we go out and something's wrong, something's bad. So we go out there and we try, long before the kit's on stage, we go through it, tighten up screws, and just really try to keep it in good shape. Most of the kits are 10 to 12 years old in a backline inventory. There's a lot of newer stuff, but we have some artists that really want to play like vintage 70s Ludwig kits or 60s Ludwig kits. So you have to have that in your inventory too. But aside from what it's like to be me, if you're a drummer and you want to have a rider, put down what you like, but also put some alternative choices.
Yeah.
Put like my first choice, my first preference is this. Put some secondary choices. And I think one of the things that nobody thinks about until you've been out there, struggling with this is your throne. Because the first thing that I would put on my hardware pack is my throne. I always go ass, gas, grass. So it's like first your throne, then your pedal, then your hi-hat. Yeah. So your throne, if you don't like a hydraulic throne, or if you're not familiar with it and you don't want to learn the hard way, they do play differently. They're a little tricky.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of guys hate them. So you should put down no hydraulic thrones, spindle, shaft, and then there's the top. It can be like a tractor seat or a round top.
Right.
Back in the old days, there were no choices, but now there's a lot of choices. You can even get thrones that have transducers in them. The Porter and Davis thrones, real popular butt kicker type throne. And those, you can rent those too. We have those, but the throne's the first thing. You sit down and you're
a whole show
in that seat. Yeah, you got to feel right about what we got. Yeah. And the last show that we did at Circuit of the Americas was 6 stages, and we supplied gear for all those stages, different types of gear. And some of the drummers were local guys, and they showed up with their own throne, pedal, hi-hat. I mean, I get snare and pedal, but when they show up with their own hi-hat stand, it's like, wow, what have you been through? Yeah. That makes you feel like you need to bring your own hi-hat stand. It's like the tag was still on our stand when we were putting it out there. And this guy was like, I'm going to use mine. I'm like, ours is brand new. Anyway, so that's my advice is you should, if you're doing a show that you can bring your favorite stuff, bring your stuff. But if you have to create a rider, your think about your throne. At least add a snare as a backup if you're bringing your own, because the snare is the easiest thing to break. It's
Yeah.
also easy to go missing if you're flying and it doesn't
Uh-huh.
show up somehow. It's like, yeah, you got to have specific things that the things that go wrong all the time: snares,
Yeah.
pedals, and
Yeah.
throne for sure.
Yeah. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Have you ever had anyone ask for cymbals that are older and have patina as opposed to something that looks like it's brand new out of the box?
Yeah, yeah. Some people want, so a lot of times people say, I don't want this. Like, I don't want, the one I get once in a while is like, I don't want a ping ride, or I don't want a flat ride. And we would never supply a flat ride anyway. It's got to have a belt because people expect it. But I mean,
Yeah.
people are specific, and you should be specific what you don't like.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things that my biggest advice is, don't ask for something that nobody has.
And that you've never
And
had.
I've never, yeah, it's like, if, yeah, if you're asking for something that's just a really oddball thing, you got to expect there's going to be a substitution when you get there.
Yeah.
But if you're going to ask for like the same, like, don't ask for the same thing as your backup. Like, I want a DW collector's kit, but if you don't have that, I want a DW performer's kit. It's like, ask for a Yamaha kit as your second, unless you're an endorser, and then, you know,
Yeah.
you got to go with what you got to go with.
How vast is your inventory as far as different finishes for each kit? Because I imagine some people are known for a certain finish, you know, a white pearl versus a green sparkle versus a, you know, certain wood babingo finish, or, you know, how specific are you able to get with folks?
I have a friend in New Mexico who was half as heartbroken as I was when I didn't get to do Max Weinberg's kit recently. Because, like you said, sometimes you get a guy who wants a white marine pearl. I had his kit, brand, model, sizes, finish. I had it exactly to spec and was ready to do it. And something with the politics of who was running sound or who was getting this contract to be the production company, we didn't get that job. And I
Oh,
was heartbroken.
oh,
So yeah, Max Weinberg is a guy who wants a white marine pearl kit. And there's a few people out there that like, don't be so specific where you like, I will not play a sparkle kit or something. It's like, well, I have everything to spec, but it's, you know, this finish or that. And our inventory is deep enough where we supply NAM. At the same time we're supplying NAM, we're supplying DW artists. So there's three things we do for NAM, but we'll talk about that later,
okay.
perhaps.
You could bring that up now if you'd like, since we're going from riders to that. That's cool.
Yeah, what happens is NAM takes place every year, and I don't know if anybody's super familiar with it, but it used to be what it started off as. It was for people who own music stores to come and see new gear. They always had it at the beginning of the year so that the music store guys would have Christmas money in their bank accounts. They could come out, see the new gear, and place their orders. And you know, uh, now it's completely evolved and morphed into
Oh yeah.
an
Certainly.
attitude. It's an attitude now. If you're not at NAM, you're nobody. It's just, you have to be able to know somebody who can get you in,
And
because
I
it's for the
think,
trade only. It's supposed to be a trade
yeah,
show.
supposed to be, but now that has morphed since the whole COVID thing. And now a lot of the big brands aren't there. And that changes what artists
Right.
are there or not. But as far as like boutique brands and stuff, yeah, that's like you got to get there, you know, to be considered and to get your stuff seen by the buyers of the retail stores, studios, venues, and things like that. So, what were the three different areas that you covered? I'm guessing it's exhibit booth for the brands that you take
Okay.
care of, the stages, and something else. Maybe surrounding gigs at
It's
venues.
sort of just, it's sort of right. Exhibit booths that are not the brands I cover, but they want me to put like a
Oh,
DW kit
like a cymbal
in.
brand that
Like
wants it on
recently,
set.
I have SE Microphones is my new company that I'm working with. And SE called and asked GW if they have a drum kit they can spare, and they said to call Lee. So I get the call from SE, and I supplied their little, it's a little white Marine Pearl jazz kit in their booth. You'll see it this year if you're there. But I supply that, and they put mics all over it to show off what their mics, how
Nice.
the mics hook up and all that. So I do their displays for unrelated companies. And then I also work with DW, LP, and Gretsch. And we've been doing this for years, maybe 15 years, supplying their artists with equipment. So if their artist is playing, let's just say they're going to be at the Gibson party at the Grove or something, and there's one of the guitarists has a drummer who plays DW, I have to supply that kit for that artist, as well as certain artists play things at the show itself. I have to jam in there. I can tell you a story about Rick Latham where we ran back to the warehouse, grabbed a kit, got there within a half an hour, set him up, and he played for about 45 seconds before they shut him down. I mean, we went through the emergency of grabbing a kit out of the warehouse and racing it over and setting it up
And then
for
for DB level, they shut him down.
And the DB police were on him before he even started. So yeah, he got about a minute's worth of play. So we didn't have to change those heads after that.
Boy, that's crazy.
Yeah. So we supply GW artists. That's the second thing. We also supply NAMM itself. That's the third thing. The organization, for years, they used to be able to get freebie stuff from everybody because they would call Zildjian and Peisty and Sabian and say, we need 5 kits, sets of cymbals for our setups. Because it's not really a performance event, but they do have 7 stages in the hotel lobbies and around the facility.
Yeah.
So we would supply NAMM with drums and percussion, and it morphed into now we're supplying them with some guitar amps and cymbals, because the cymbal companies, as you said, some of the big companies aren't showing up. So yeah, we have to help them out with that. So that's it. We supply NAMM itself, and they actually give us like not a NAMM badge, but an employee NAMM badge.
Yeah. And
we supply DW and LP artists and Gretsch artists with their gear. And then we do some of the booths where they need some kind of display.
Yeah.
So that's 3 things we do.
That's cool. What is the most odd or vintage thing that you have in your inventory?
Well, I've got a 48-inch gong that we used to use with Kool and the Gang. We took that out with Kool and the Gang for years.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, I don't know if you saw the news, but that guy who was their utility, he was their original drummer. He just passed away last week.
We did post that story. That's very sad after so many years. So you have
he was
a 48-inch gong?
Yeah, I still have the 48-inch gong. It's in a flat case over here about 3 feet away.
Wow. Is it for sale?
Yeah. I got the timpani that we used to use on those. I mean, all that stuff.
All that stuff. Is the gong for sale?
Never.
Okay. I have a gong, but I want a different type of gong.
Well, I imported this one direct from China at the request of my daughter, who she was at NAMM with me, and she was like, "You got to see this gong." So I ordered one direct.
Oh, that's
anyway.
Cool. There's I get these ads all the time in my social media feeds from the Gong Shop. And
sure.
There's some amazing, this one I just saw has like a mirror finish, but it's emerald green. And it's called the Emerald something. And then there's another one that has a sun and just some fascinating stuff. Like, I got to stop looking at that or I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah, they're pricey.
Yeah. Fun stuff. So let's talk about you as a drummer. What kind of music did you grow up with and what do you like to play?
Well, I was married young, and I played a lot of cover bands. I had like a day job, and then I worked in a really popular cover band that they moved us around. We were at a Mexican restaurant in Southern California for years. And they would literally keep you playing at one, we'd be in the cantina of one place, and then like 3 months later, they'd move us, 5 miles or 10 miles away, and we would still have the same crowd following us around. So
wow, that's cool.
Back when live music was really, happening.
Yeah, what time period was that?
That would have been like late 70s, early 80s.
Okay, because that's when I was playing a ton a lot. And I grew up in the West San Fernando Valley. I don't know if you know that.
Orange County.
Yeah, I grew up right up the road in West Hills.
Yeah, I grew up around 4 miles away from Disneyland,
Okay, right near the Nam show.
right by the NAM show. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, what advice do you have for, especially for drummers, as far as taking care of their gear? You know, their hardware, to clean or not to clean the cymbals. Do baby wipes? I actually know the answer to this, but I'm gonna throw it out there. Do baby wipes really get the scuffs off of clear heads? You know, like, do you have some maintenance tips you can give people?
I think baby wipes leave a residue on clear heads,
A little
but
bit,
they do,
yeah. At the
yeah,
same
they
time,
do actually take,
I think it might be faking our eyes out by doing that, and it looks like the scuffs are gone.
maybe so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. We change heads so often, uh, but we have used the little green scratchy pads on white coated heads to get the just the dirt and scuffs off of that before.
Oh.
Shout out for Nicole because she does all that stuff. She keeps all the stuff clean.
Oh, nice.
She took over. She took over the backline company, Austin Backline. I don't know, 7, 8 years ago,
Oh,
and
okay.
I'm supposed to be retired, but I fail. I'm not good at that. Yeah, I keep getting calls and taking calls, and
Yeah, that's good
but
though.
advice I would give is if you like something, use it, and if you like it, put it on your rider. And if you got to be able to come up with some alternatives, some substitutes if that's not available. But try not to use house gear if you can avoid it. Those are nightmares, and it's abused and neglected. And the good stuff is from backline companies. In fact, a lot of times we get people who say this is a nicer kit than I own. And
Oh, cool.
that's a nice compliment when an artist says, this is a nicer kit than I actually own. And that's
Oh,
pretty cool.
that is cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing with house kits, Lee, is that a lot of times they're owned by people who don't really know what they have or how it's supposed to work. And then the lack of care, you know, all that you said all mixed together, and then you end up with what you have.
Yeah. Another thing I just remembered
Yeah.
about riders, uh, people, one of the things that people really are fussy about and might not know it yet, they'll be fussy when they, is drum floor toms that are on stands versus on legs. If you like them on stands, great. You won't often find them because most people in their rider specify must not be on stand, must be on legs.
Oh,
So people
interesting.
who, yeah, it's a really interesting thing. People don't like one or the other. Usually they don't like them on stands because they tip over.
Huh.
If you're getting it from a backline company and it's not your personal that you set up
Yeah.
and have memory locks and all that in your spot, it's like, yeah, you're likely to get something tip over. But you should know which one you prefer and ask for that.
That's a
That's my
really
advice.
great tip because I think a lot of people wouldn't, like, I would have never thought of that. Um, that's interesting. Yeah. Huh. I'm thinking through, and on my blue kit, my two floor toms, all the drums are on stands now that I think about it, except the bass drum.
Yeah.
But my floor toms are not floor toms because they're not on the floor, but you know what I mean? They're a
They're
16,
suspended toms. Yeah.
yeah, 16 and an 18. They're on a stand. And have they ever tipped over? I don't think so. I think it tipped over once when I wasn't paying attention and I took one of them off to do something, and then the weight of the
The
other.
other one goes, the weight of the other one
Yeah,
knocks it over.
yeah. I think that
Sure.
happened once, and they've been on stands since 1983, so that's not a bad record.
Not bad.
Yeah,
Yeah. But if that was a backline kit, you'd have people say, I don't want that. I want my floor toms on legs.
yeah, especially if that's what they're used to. Yeah.
But the backline riders, you will have like in-ear monitors or DJ gear and all this stuff now that's on riders because bands have DJs, bands have the technology has
Yeah,
changed.
that's
So
right. Yeah, and
everything's different, and put everything that you need on your list because it might, if you want in-ears, put it on your backline rider because it may not be there with audio.
How about
They may not.
electronic drums? Do you have many electronic kits in your inventory?
We have some voice modules and we have some pads, but we don't really get requests for electronic kits as a rule. Most of the time, even if they're going to use electronics, it's going to be a trigger on the drum or some kind of trigger mounted on a
Yes.
stand somewhere. But
Yes.
yeah, SPD, the SPD SX is a really popular thing. And
Mm-hmm.
we recently added the clamp on attachments in our backline kits, our little Pelican cases that we take everywhere.
Yeah.
We put these because everybody shows up with an SPD pad and asks if you have an extra snare stand or a way to mount it. So yeah, now we're guaranteed that we'll be able to accommodate that.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
that's
How
a
about
recent thing.
rototoms? Do you have
Yeah,
rototoms?
my old partner got those when we stopped being partners anymore. He ended up he's got the complete set, literally from 6 inches to 18 inches,
Oh
and
wow.
all the mounting stands. So yeah, he's got them. If we needed them, I could just call him and say, "Hey, dust them off. Let's get them out."
That's cool. And I know from the pictures that you sent that we used to promote this, you have a ton of Latin percussion gear that's just beautiful, from
Yeah.
congas to bongos and all sorts of go-go bells, cowbells, anything you can shake. Really good inventory on that stuff. Yeah.
All right, you want to hear a good story about that?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
we do have we work with LP, so we work with their artists. So if their artist has a series, signature series, we'll have that in
Oh,
our inventory.
nice.
And we'll have the complete set, like Pedrito Martinez or Richie Gajate Garcia. But we found out that we were going to do a backline for Diana Ross. And Ronnie Powell is typically her percussionist, and I knew him from the old days, but I'd known Richie for years. I called Richie and I found out he was going to be on that show. I said, "So do you want to use your signature series congas?" And he's like, "I would love to, but I'm not allowed to because all the backline has to be black because Diana Ross wears $80,000 gowns and she doesn't want anything distracting from
Oh, good grief.
the front line." I love Diana Ross, but she is fussy. Her nickname is the boss.
Yeah.
So before Bruce Springsteen came along, she was the boss. Anyway, so I called my good friend Sergio, who I work with quite a bit, and I said, "Hey, you got a painting rig, right?" And he said, "Yeah." So we painted Richie Gajate's brown congas black,
Oh,
and we
wow.
showed those, and he loved them.
That's cool.
In fact, he owns them now because he loved us so much that he called us and said, "Are you going to be at NAMM?" We said, "Yeah." He goes, "Could you bring the black Gajate congas because I want to trade you a brand new set of mine and take that one for when I work with Diana and stuff." So
That's
yeah,
perfect.
yeah, that's what we ended up doing. We do those. We do kind of go the extra mile for some of our artists, especially old friends like that.
Yeah.
But we surprised him. We didn't tell him what we were going to do. We just did it.
That's great. That's awesome. Lee, thanks so much for taking time to join me and talk about gear. We'll do this again sometime. It was really fun. And folks, if you're seeing
Sure.
this on the archive, go ahead and throw some questions in there. And Lee will go through from time to time and answer some questions. If you have questions, like we got the great question from Thomas Souza about paying for drum heads and what's the going rate? What should you expect? Why should you pay for them? When we did the 10-year Drum Talk TV anniversary show, I had those timpani drums and I knew I was going to play with them with regular drumsticks. And after a while, they can dimple. My own are dimpled right now. And so I went around and around up until the couple days before the show. Should I just buy new heads, not tell them anything, change them out, and then take them off? And I thought that just sounds like so much work, especially as you know, Lee, for timpani drums. It's not like just going
Yeah.
zip, 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 it's different. And I thought, I'm not going to say anything and I'm going to see what happens. And if they're messed up and they want to charge me, I'll say, "Oops, I lost my mind, was having so much fun. How much is it?" And thankfully, I was able to play on them for a couple different fills during The Song Remains the Same and a couple other things. And then during Moby Dick, not
Yeah.
one scuff or dimple on those heads.
No, you did good. You
I
did
was
good.
I checked them every time. If anyone watches the video from The Song Remains the Same, there's a shot from behind me when I do that long fill during the slow vocal part. And after I hit them, you can see me checking them while I'm playing. Like I didn't have to do that. I could just looked at after the show. I don't know. It was just instinctive, I guess.
I
Lots of
think you
cool
were
stuff.
just checking to make sure, is this going to cost me money or not?
Right, exactly. Is my wife going to yell at me or not? So there you go.
Oh, say hello to her from
I
me.
will. Thank you. Yeah, she's been
Give her
in
my love.
Las Vegas where a bunch of our kids live since the week before the holiday, and she's going to be there another probably week and a half. But I'll talk to her this afternoon actually, and I will do so. She says the same. She knows having you on, and again, my best to Raquel. Thank you for coming to the show as well. Can't wait to talk to you about something that I can't talk about yet, as you know. Wait, what? Are we still live? We are still live.
I haven't talked to her. I know your secret. I haven't talked to her.
Okay, I talked. We chatted a bit, but we'll talk some
Cool.
more. And I want to thank everybody for joining Lee and myself here on Drum Talk TV, talking about gear, talking about house gear, backline gear, riders, flyouts, bus tours, festivals, shows, everything. And we'll do it again because there's always more to talk about when it comes to gear. So, Lee, hang on the line with me for a few minutes after we say goodbye. And, folks, thanks again for following what we do. It means so much to us. And we still got a bunch of stuff coming in the last month of the year and a really fun way to kick off the new year. 2024? What? Thanks, everyone.
Wow.